So I was just talking about the Spectrum News article entitled "It's Time to Embrace Profound Autism" by Alison Singer, because she's arguing that profound autism has been completely neglected. I mean, it's true you don't really hear about people with profound autism anymore in the media. I mean, you do sometimes, but the media is mainly dominated by very, very able autistic people, talking about it just being a difference and the whole neurodiversity thing. So obviously I can understand why parents or carers of those who are very profoundly autistic or severely autistic or whatever you want to call it, why they are not happy with the state of affairs, particularly when very able autistic advocates claiming to speak on behalf of their children when their priorities are completely separate, when they gaslight parents of profoundly autistic children who are trying to get medical interventions for their children when they've got no idea what it's like, and then they claim that their children can speak for themselves if they were given the right technology, blah blah blah, when actually their children can't even conceptualise the abstractions of the neurodiversity movement in the first place. So, it's completely outside of what they're capable of understanding. So their parents have to advocate on their behalf, and it's not very helpful when their parents are trying to do whatever they can for their kids when they're basically being gaslit by these very able autistic advocates from the neurodiversity movement. So you can understand why there's going to be this ill will there. And when autism as a diagnosis means so many different things now, that's where you enter this problem. Whereas if we had very distinct diagnoses, you wouldn't have this mismatch. People would be able to talk more meaningfully about their particular needs without it encroaching on other people's needs, essentially. So I do agree that we need separate diagnoses, but like I was saying in my previous video, that I guess I would come under the highly able person that she's talking about in some respects, because I am highly verbally able, I'm very verbally able, and some people would say I have mild autism because I am highly verbally able, and I can do YouTube videos and things like that. I do not experience my disability at all as mild. If you can't make meaningful friendships, if I've got no low inhibiting hell of having a relationship, even though if I didn't have autism I might quite like that, but because I don't even know how to relate to people, that's been taken away from me by this disgusting, apologies, neurodiversity people, sometimes you just have to use the right words, condition. I wouldn't exactly describe not being able to connect to people as mild. No, it's very serious, particularly when you do rely on other people helping you and getting your needs met, and I'm very lucky that currently I do have a good support network. I might not always have a good support network. I can easily imagine getting to old age and being completely neglected. How fun would that be? Let's not think too much about the future, but yes, you do have these worries when you're autistic. It's not a fun thing to have when you can't connect with other people and when you have severe executive problems. So, as I was saying in my other video, I am miles apart from her daughter. In some respects, yes, her daughter is 10 times, 50 times, however many times you want to call it, more severe than I am. But that doesn't make my condition any less severe either, if that makes sense, because I actually have a different condition to her daughter. So we're not actually comparing the same things. So yep, we do need different diagnoses. Yep, we do. Because then I can talk about my issues and talk about them being severe without treading on the feet of those whose needs are completely different to my own, whose worlds I cannot even begin to imagine. Because it's difficult when it's all talked about the same condition. I have to tread carefully, because I can't say I'm severely autistic, because that would be incredibly offensive to those people like this parent here. But I'm not mildly autistic, so what language do I use? You know what I'm saying? But if there was a new diagnosis that was created for people like me just to which I would like there to be actually, that distinguishes very clearly my needs from people who are incredibly able, the Melanie Sykes of the world. I mean, she's pretty like creme de la creme, but you know, people like that, and I know other autistic people in a similar sort of situation who, yes, they might have struggles. I'm not saying they don't have struggles. Their struggles might be severe in their own way, a bit like, you know, this person's daughter is way more severe than I am in some respects, but that only matters if we're assuming it's the same condition, which it actually isn't. So it'd actually help everyone. Like I say, I know there are people out there, autistic people who have a good job, who are earning their own money, not, you know, who can raise a family. Now, they might not have an easy life. You know, I'm sure they don't. I know they don't, as a matter of fact, because I've heard them talk about it. They have their own challenges, you know, very difficult situations. But they have the ability to connect with others, at least enough to have kids, which I don't. And that suggests that they don't have the same condition I have, because, you know, I can't really relate to that. You know, that's a completely different world to what I inhabit. They are more able than me, that's a fact. In some respects, they're more able than me, just as I'm way more able than this person's daughter. And I would argue that people like Melanie Sykes, and not just people like Melanie Sykes, but any autistic person who has that skill set, which I don't have or will never have, because I don't have their type of autism. My autism has stopped me relating normally, full stop. Basically, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that they need to create a split between me and people like them. Instead of assuming that we all have the same condition, what used to be called Asperger's autism, I don't think that just because you can talk, they always assume that verbal ability automatically means you have this type of autism. Like, if you can talk, you have this type of autism. If you can't talk, you have this type of autism. It's like a binary split between verbal and non-verbal. I would argue that actually you can be, and I'm treading really carefully here because I don't want to offend parents of autistic kids like this person who have really profound autism. I would actually say maybe they need to create a distinction between profound autism and severe autism. Maybe, because like, I think profound autism would be like a mother with this autistic child who basically has a severe intellectual disability and has all of those other problems. And I would say, yeah, that's profound autism. I would say it's also possible to be severely autistic, and I'm treading carefully. I don't want to offend anyone who's got who has a type of autism I can never contemplate. They are way more severe than me. I'm not trying to trivialise their condition or say I'm similar to them in any way, because we're completely different. And I'm thankful that I don't have what they have, because like I say, that must be hell enough. And I can understand why their parents would do anything to get rid of that for their child. But what I'm suggesting is that maybe it's possible to be severely autistic and to still be verbal. Because they always assume that verbal ability means you have mild autism, because it's like this whole idea that if you can talk, then you know you can get by in society, or that you don't need other people supporting you that much. Like, it's this idea that talking is everything. And I just think that's kind of rather, I don't like that. I just think that's rather old-fashioned and backward. And because if you look at autism, sorry, this is probably turning into a bit of a rambling video, I haven't really thought this through. Because if you look at autism, the actual core area of difficulty in autism is the social side, isn't it? That's what basically autism is, self-state. That's kind of what distinguishes autism from other conditions. So it could be argued that severe autism, the more severe your autism is, the less able you are to make relationships, to have friendships, and all those things. It's not to say it's impossible, but for a more severe the autism, the harder that's going to be, isn't it? And yeah, and I agree with this person, Alison Singer, that there should be a separate diagnosis of profound autism for those who are really, really vulnerable and have all these additional problems like severe intellectual disability, can't speak, all of those things. They need to be given a separate diagnosis. They really do, because otherwise they're just going to be completely neglected. So I completely agree with her. But I'm just wondering whether they could also make a more nuanced kind of distinction between, in terms of different types of autism, and make it clear that you can talk and be verbal and still be severely autistic. Because, or if they don't use the word autism, maybe they could use a different term. Because like there's got to be something that distinguishes me from people like Melanie Sykes, and not, I keep on coming back to Melanie Sykes, but not just Melanie Sykes. Any autistic person who is able to get married, have a relationship, like raise kids, you know, have a good job. And by good job, I don't just mean stacking shelves down in Tesco's. No offence to people who do that. I'd actually quite like to do that if I didn't have OCD. I don't mean things like that. Or, you know, and obviously some autistic people have jobs, but like they're like beneath their qualifications, or they've had like a lot of support to get there and stuff like that. And talking about like really high flying careers, like jobs that even neurotypicals might struggle to attain. I'm talking about autistics who can manage that, and not just that, because that might be possible on itself, but they still might struggle socially, so they might just put all their motivation into that, particularly if it's a special interest. But if they do that and they raise a family, and they could do all of that on their own 2 feet, basically, just like any other person, well, not like any other person, because even I know it's difficult to struggle with that, but you know what I mean. They could do all of that. They don't have the same condition as me. It's quite simple. They just don't. And I'd like some way of distinguishing myself from them, because you could say, well, it doesn't matter, and in an ideal world it wouldn't matter, but we don't live in an ideal world. We live in a world where I need to get support, where governments are trying to take away my benefits and things like that, okay? And basically I need some way of explaining the severity of my condition. And when the neurodiversity movement is saying autism's just a difference, it's not a disability, it's not a disorder, that is basically harming me. It's harming me, because governments love it. Oh, autism's not a disability. We can take away your benefits. You're not disabled. You know, it's not a disability. Well then, why are you trying to apply for services if it's not a disability? So yes, because it's actually really harmful, this neurodiversity narrative, for people who actually are disabled. And obviously those who are profoundly autistic, you know, for parents and carers of people like that, it can affect as well. I guess they at least can fall back on the intellectual disability diagnosis. I can't do that. So a lot of them now aren't even mentioning autism anymore. They're just focusing on a child's intellectual disability. For people like me, it's a lot harder because